Somebody comes in and they're having irregular periods or heavy periods or PMS symptoms. So we just put them on birth control. That negates everything and it just
Right.
controls hormones. So it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. We use the same treatment. All of a sudden you're 50 and you go to menopause and then you just switch to a different type of hormone, but it's the same thing.
Welcome to the Resiliency Method, the truth about healing. I'm Dr. Erika, and we are here to uncover the root causes keeping you stuck. Together, we'll restore your energy, your focus, and your resiliency so you can finally heal, regenerate, and feel truly alive again. The Women's Health Initiative study used pregnant mares' urine and synthetic progestin found in such high rates of breast cancer and stroke that they cut the study short at 3.5 years and then labeled all hormone replacement as dangerous. Welcome to the Resiliency Method, the Truth About Healing podcast. I'm Dr. Erika Schultz, and Dr. Aimee Duffy here is exposing the 20-year nightmare that this created for women. Instead of recognizing that Premarin and PremPro were the problem, conventional medicine threw out all hormone therapy and told women to suffer through their depression, their insomnia, their brain fog, and their metabolic chaos, or mask symptoms with antidepressants and sleeping pills. And today, we are here revealing the truth about bioidentical hormones that are chemically identical to your own and why they're not only safe but prevent chronic disease, and how to find a practitioner who actually will work with you and knows how to test and balance them correctly. So join me today. You won't want to miss this one. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Dr. Erika. Thank you for joining us today on the Resiliency Method, the Truth About Healing podcast. I'm joined today by Dr. Aimee Duffy. Dr. Aimee is a board certified physician. She's an entrepreneur and the president of the North Carolina Integrative Medical Society. She has transformed her practice into a thriving 7-figure business, and she is passionate about both patients and practitioners achieving sustainable success. She works with a lot of great functional medicine practitioners in the area, especially of BHRT. She is a best-selling author and award-winning speaker. She's presented at Carnegie Hall, the Harvard Club of Business, NASDAQ, and is a frequent media guest on ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox. She's a mom of 4 daughters, and she's an avid tennis player, and she's playing up right now in her league too, by the way. And her mission is to empower people to reclaim their vitality and build fulfilling lives without burnout. Welcome, Dr. Aimee. So great to have you here today. Love to hear from you on what got you off on this journey. What inspired you to focus on women's health and functional medicine?
Well, it's sort of a story that goes all the way back to when I was little. I just absolutely loved babies. I wanted to hold all the babies. Anytime there was a baby in the room, I was drawn to this baby.
Oh,
And when I was 11, we were at a pancake breakfast in Boulder, Colorado, where I was growing up. And there was a baby that was about 11 months old or so sitting in the sand, kind of hanging out. And I just went over and started playing with him. And his mom was there. And she said, "Oh, well, do you babysit? He just seems to love you." And I was like, "I don't know if I'm allowed to babysit. I'm only 11." And so that was my first job, basically, was to be a mother's helper is what we called it. So
oh,
they were in the neighborhood. I'd walk over there and come hang out for like, 2, 3 hours
nice.
while she was, trying to get stuff done around the house or whatever. And that just progressed. So she had more babies. Her sister lived close by and she had babies. And so I was babysitting. That was like my only job. I think I tried to have a real job at Subway sandwiches, and it lasted about 3 weeks, and I was like, "Oh, this is too much. I wanna go back to playing with babies."
Nice.
So, when I was a senior in high school, they were having another baby and invited me to come be in the delivery room, which was very special. I was kind of part of the family at that point, and so that was my first kind of real experience, in a hospital setting in medicine. And just once that baby was delivered, baby Josh was put on his mom's chest, and I just thought, this is the coolest thing. Like, I want to do this. I want to deliver babies. I'm going to go to med school and I'm going to do this. And so that's what I did. I went to college, I went to medical school. And then while in medical school, I had my baby number 1. So that changed life a little bit in terms of where I was going. And I just remember, and probably medical school is not quite what you see on TV, but it's pretty hardcore. And, in the OBGYN, which is what I thought I was going to do, it was just hard and they were not very nice. And I just thought, is this really what I want to do? Like, I've I want to deliver babies, but I don't know if this is the lifestyle I want. And then I did family practice rotation, and it was just totally the opposite. Like, it was just so calm, kind of cool. People were having babies and I had already had one. And so it just felt much more family oriented, and so they could also deliver babies. And then the cool part about that is you can see the babies, in pediatrics as well.
Yeah.
So you kind of get this full spectrum. So
Nice.
that's what I chose to do. And I ended up here in South Carolina doing a residency that was very strong in obstetrics. So I got C-section privileges. I delivered all the babies. I delivered everybody else's babies who didn't want to deliver.
Uh-huh.
They just had to do their requirement for residency, and then they were done. And I was like, give them all to me. Um, so then that led me to a year later after I graduated. I stayed on as an attending physician, and then the OBGYN practice here in town offered me a job and said, come deliver babies and be primary care at our practice for all of these women who go to the GYN for their primary care and share OB call. And I thought that was just a dream job for me. I was super excited
Nice.
about
Yeah.
and it was a dream job. But what I found very quickly is that I had a lot of experience in OB and delivering babies, but 2 weeks of a rotation in GYN in family practice residency. So I was very inadequate is what I felt like in just sort of general women's health and particularly hormones. So this was 2006, 2007. The Women's Health Initiative had come out a couple years prior to that, which was this huge study, if you want to call it. It was not a
Yes.
very good study, but this huge, message that hormones were bad, right? They were using information that we can dive into that info. But basically, we were all told hormones are bad. They're causing breast cancer and strokes, and you should get people off hormones. You should use other methods to support their symptoms and that kind of stuff. And so,
Yeah, I mean, it
you know,
resulted in a black box warning, didn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, here I am stuck between kind of a rock and a hard place of women's health, but not really able, to support them in what we were kind of trained as, here's some hormone replacement, right?
Right.
So, we had lots of things in the shelf, including Premarin and PremPro and, whatever estrogen replacement there was. And of course, birth control pills you could use. And so it was quite cookie cutter, just like, let's see what's in the shelf and we can try that for a little bit. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll do something else. There was really very little actual like thought process to it, at least what I felt.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't like it. I was like, okay, I can give you something that we have studies that say causes harm to your health, long term, or you could suffer, or I could band-aid it with an antidepressant, type medication that just makes you not feel anything and not care about it. And it just didn't sit well with me. Like, what,
Yeah.
it's not a good choice for any of us to have. So I started just this was kind of really before internet, significantly. I mean, we had like email and stuff, but we really didn't do a whole lot of internet stuff. And I happened upon a conference that was natural hormone balancing. And I said, this sounds like what I want to learn about. And so that
Yeah.
was 2008. I went to this first conference, and that was really like the moment of, I call it like Alice in Wonderland when she's going through this tiny little door into this, beautiful world of functional medicine, which is really, looking at like what's actually happening in the body, being able to test and balance. And, it's not just a guessing game, it's actually what's there. And then over the years, as I, continued to do that work, and then I'd go to another conference and it was like, well, we are talking about hormones, but we're also talking about the liver and detox, and we're talking about the gut, and we're talking about the brain connection, and we're talking about cardiovascular and inflammation and metabolics. I mean, it just started like all sort of recognizing that this is not, a cookie cutter. This is not just one thing that we need to be talking about. There's this sort of, I think about the inside of a clock, or with
Yeah.
wheels, and they all kind of
Yeah.
have to be spinning at the right process to be able to function and get to where we want to be. And so,
I don't wanna interrupt your story,
yeah,
but I also just am kind of taken right now by just your excitement and the passion that you're conveying in your voice when you talk about this, and this is almost, what, 20 years ago when you unwound this amount of this little piece of your career, which was, I think, based on your success in this area,
yeah.
is a reflection of
I mean, it
how
just
inspired you were, yeah?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just fun, I mean, I just love doing medicine this way. I love that feeling of the aha moment when patients,
Yeah.
I'm explaining to them what's going on and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense." Like that,
Yeah.
why doesn't everybody do this? Like,
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't know why. Like, we're not taught
Yeah.
this in traditional medicine. The supplements and even, compounded hormone prescriptions that we might use are not, governed by big pharma, unfortunately. And so,
Yeah.
there's no money in it.
Yeah.
Um, if you want
Yeah.
to think that that's the way
Right.
most traditional medicine, unfortunately, is driven, right? So,
Yeah. By not
um,
treating people
so it
well,
was
but
just the
managing.
perfect fit. I mean, we were joking earlier when we were meeting chatting is I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, which is very granola. So it just sort of, fit with kind of this natural sort of approach to how I wanted to do medicine. And what's funny is, well, long story into longer story, but so I was in the OBGYN practice. They were looking at getting bought out by the hospital system, which is what all these small independent practices were doing in 2010, 2015, that era. I mean, still happening now, but it's rare that you're going to find, at least in small towns, any independent practices. Like I have one, and I think there's one other one in Clemson, and that's about it.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, wow.
so
Yeah.
that business was going to go into big business, bought out by the hospital system, and I knew that that was just not the direction I wanted to go. They were going to make me stay within the boxes of what labs the hospital could run, and I wanted to do stool testing and saliva testing for hormones and
Yeah.
doing different things. And so it just sort of naturally happened that the hospital system was going a different direction, and I said I don't want to do that. So I knew nothing about business, but I had a consultant who said we can help you start a practice, and we know how to do it. We've done it before, and I was like, okay. So here we go. And that was 15 years ago now. 2011 is when I opened in October. So we'll be celebrating 15 years this year. And I feel like it's just sort of come full circle where, I started this whole thing bringing life into the world by delivering babies. And now I hear all the time, like, you gave me my life back.
Yeah.
So these,
You
women,
rebirthed
most,
them.
most
You
of
did
them
you
women.
rebirthed. It almost sounds like you rebirthed yourself even
Yeah,
from the traditional medical
absolutely.
system into this new realm, which I just think I do talk to a lot of medical doctors and, the passion y'all have for just having discovered this facet. But also I know that sometimes there can be a lot of challenge when you're disrupting the mainstream and how it's always been modeled. What's that journey been like for you as a medical professional? Have you been received well, or were you able just to exit it because you created your own thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I stayed in the hospital for a couple of years in trying to deliver babies. And, it just came to the place where I was delivering other people's babies more than mine in terms of, sharing call with other people. And, babies don't come on the schedule that create on the calendar. And so, uh, I lingered in the hospital system and with that group for a while. Um, and there was a little, I'd get like, how's your voodoo medicine going? But it was friendly, it was joking, it was fine. Like they didn't really care. I don't get a whole lot of referrals from, the kind of the traditional medical system. They don't really know
Okay.
what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I get a lot of referrals from alternative, chiropractors and acupuncturists, massage therapists, PTs. Um, and then, of course, other patients who have been through the process and want help. I actually saw a speech therapist when I was on a walk today that I had, knew way back when I was in the hospital as a resident. And she said, "Are you still doing hormone stuff? I need to come see you." I didn't need it back then, but I need it now. So she remembered me from way back then.
Yeah.
So, I think it was received fine. I wasn't competing with anybody. So, just kind of like figuring it out on my own. It has been a significant journey. Think, this is really where it gets, not only did I step out of the box of, the traditional medicine, the cookie cutter type
Yeah.
medications and only test what insurance will cover, that sort of thing, but I had to really step out of the box from a business perspective because I tried to do this in an insurance model, and it really doesn't work that way. So,
So are you all cash model then inside your practice then? You do not
yes.
work you really don't have the ability inside of functional medicine to really get any of that service covered even today, 20 years later? No?
I fought it for a long time. We tried
Yeah.
very hard, and what happens is we just end up spending so much time and energy and even trying to get reimbursed for a couple $100 that I just said, it
Yeah.
just isn't worth it.
Make
Let's just focus on getting better. Focus on, and what I tell people, it's not, I mean, we have to have a healthy business in order to stay in business so I can
Right,
support you, right? If I
right,
can't pay the rent and I can't pay my team and,
right.
support the business, then, we're not gonna be able to support you.
Sure.
And at
Makes
the same time, I wanted a business that wasn't gonna lead me to burnout. And what I saw all the time in other practitioners was, the stress and burnout of having, required to see so many patients a day and,
yeah,
make sure you check all the boxes that insurance wants you to check for coverage and then
right.
not getting reimbursed and having to, chase it down and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I had 4 babies at home and I would go home and put them all to bed and then sit down and chart for another 2 or 3 hours every night,
Yeah, I know, it
trying to make sure that you're all caught up and, that was back before AI and, any transcription services and stuff that we have now, but still, you know, that's not the life that I wanted to lead, and I found a lot of stress in that myself, and so then I wasn't the mom I wanted to be, I wasn't the wife I wanted to be, I wasn't the practitioner that I wanted to be, I wasn't the leader for my team that I needed to be, and so, when I sort of transitioned and said, "This isn't working for anybody,"
right,
and if I
right.
don't take care of myself and take care of the business, then we're not gonna be anything to any of our patients.
Exactly.
So, we don't
That's a
we
hard
don't do stress in our office, like, not allowed.
right, you're trying to create more openness and more calm in people's worlds. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I think is an interesting thing for, patients to understand that difference, and maybe it's something I think it's something you and I live and breathe every day because, I also am just a cash-based practice, but I think sometimes that deters patients from pursuing care, and I think sometimes there's a really monumental shift in viewpoint that could happen there because that, unfortunately, if that's a requirement for your healthcare is that it's paid for by your insurance, you have to really take a step back and look at what is it that you're actually going to get paid for, and when it comes to the type of care that we're offering to patients, it's really worth evaluating if the single most important aspect of your life, your health, is really worth sort of putting or into a box where, well, if my insurance doesn't pay for it, then I'm not going to do it. Right. Yeah.
Or, I mean, that's probably the number one question we get, at least, online, somebody will see me posting something, and then it's like, "Do you take insurance?" Um, and it's not about do we take insurance, right? It's that insurance doesn't pay for what we do.
Exactly.
And so we're chasing, like I said, we're chasing. We spend our first consultation visit for you to come see me or one of my practitioners is 90 minutes, it's a minimum. So we block 2 hours just because I wanna have the time. I don't wanna be in a hurry. I don't want the next person
Right.
waiting for me if you need more time from me. So we've got to allow flexibility in the schedule to go a 2-hour visit versus, what insurance will pay us for
Yes.
is, a 7 to 10-minute conversation. They reimburse,
Crazy.
maybe $38. And then, so if we're trying to pay the bills, how many $38 visits do you need in a day to pay the rent and pay your salaries for your team and your
Absolutely.
internet bill and whatever,
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
I
it's
mean, but
not even about out here trying to make a whole bunch more money, I mean,
right, right. Are you tired of treatments, protocols, and gurus who promise results but don't deliver? You're not alone. For years, I struggled with my own long term illness, and I know how frustrating it feels when nothing seems to work. That's why I developed the Resiliency Method. It's a science backed approach to combining the best of Western and ancient medicines to restore your body's natural intelligence. Patient after patient has discovered what's possible, living stronger, brighter, and more spiritually connected than ever before. Whether you're facing autoimmune issues, hormonal imbalances, weight struggles, or just feeling stuck, you don't need another quick fix. You need a clear path forward. Take the first step with a discovery call at drerikaonline.com/discovery. That's DRERIKA online.com/discovery. Or dive deeper with a full initial consultation at drerikaonline.com/initial-consultation because your health, your clarity, and your freedom cannot wait. Yeah, to your
it's
point, it
about the
does.
life.
there's costs that go into running even a cash-based practice,
Yeah,
and it's like, do you want your practitioner to show up burned out and bogged down from the minutia of having to interact with the insurance companies, or do you want your practitioner being able to actually attend the conferences where they're keeping their skill sets
right,
sharp, their knowledge
right.
sharp, and on the cutting edge? I mean, it's really like, it's really gotta it comes down to just thinking about it from a strategic perspective for sure. So, great, but you had brought up earlier, some information, just sharing because I know your area is specialty is, like we said, the rebirth, the perimenopause, the midlife health, scenario. So I definitely do wanna delve into that with you, talking about, that study a little bit more, if you can shed some light on what that study did. Now, I do think that that study also was using I think this is fair to say, some medications that maybe we're not really using anymore.
Yes. Oh, I'll
And
say them all day long. I mean, I'm
yeah,
all about it, you know.
yeah,
So that study that was done by the Women's Health Initiative, there was thousands of women in this study, but the average patient was like 65. And
mhm,
so, it wasn't even the patients that were actually like using hormone replacement on. I mean, not to say that 65-year-olds don't benefit from that, they do, um, but it turned it off for a lot of people. And they were using Premarin and something called PremPro, which is so Premarin is pregnant mare's urine, which is, a hormone derived from horse urine basically. And so it's very much, if you look, get really scientific. And now I got C's in biochemistry both in college and medical school, so I am not a biochemist. However, I use it all the time every day, and so I'm like, this is crazy turnaround. But I can visualize it now and I can see, the molecules and the structure and whatever. And so anyway, that hormone from pregnant mare's urine is very much nothing like a human hormone, but yet we were using it as hormone replacement. And it was initially designed to help with hot flashes, and then found, more medically to be, preventative for osteoporosis. And so most women that were on it by 2000s was on it for bone health protection. And
okay,
then basically it was like this algorithm. So you're in menopause, do you have a uterus? Yes or no? If you have a uterus, then you need PremPro, which had synthetic progestin in it to protect the lining of the uterus from any overexposure to estrogen, which could lead to uterine cancer.
right,
So here we are having another chemical in order to protect you from the first chemical that was put into your body.
right, yeah,
Smart.
okay,
And so then if you had a hysterectomy and you didn't have a uterus anymore, then you didn't need that. But we also have multiple other parts of our body, like breasts and your brain and your heart and all that stuff
mhm,
that could benefit from
pituitary, your hypothalamus, your
progesterone, right?
thymus, yeah,
So
mhm,
anyway, it was all just crazy. And
yeah,
so that study found that particularly the arm that was PremPro had so many negative side effects.
that's the female horse urine?
Yes.
Okay,
So that study was supposed to last for 7 years and actually was cut off short at like 3.5 to 4 years because they found such an increased incidence in breast cancers and stroke in that arm. And so they said, "This is unethical for us to continue this because we know that it causes harm, so we need to stop the study, get these patients off of it." So then that came out, and interestingly, it came out, like, in the, Wall Street Journal, which is not a medical,
oh,
publication by
yeah,
any means. So it just basically what happened then is that not recognizing that it was Premarin and PremPro that were causing all the harm, all hormone replacement got nixed. And
wait,
so, basically it was like, "This is bad. Hormone replacement can cause all this harm." And so, we were told basically to get any women that was on it off of it, not start anybody on it, or according to the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, you could use the lowest dose possible for the shortest period of time to help the woman through menopause. And so here we are saying it's bad, but okay, if you use it a little bit for a little bit of time, like how do we know? There's no
right,
way to test it, there's no way to measure, it's just monitoring, right? Which what does that
right,
mean? And
waiting for the
there's
shoe to
no,
fall, yeah,
literally like the way I was taught again in residency very little was start the patient on the low dose and see them back in 6 months. And if they had, less hot flashes, then yay. If they still had hot flashes, and you just increase their dose. Like there was no testing and no way to sort of say, is this working? Yes or no, besides what the patient felt. And or is there any tests that are showing that it's going to cause you harm? later, right? And so it was
Interesting.
just
Yeah.
very
And
weird. I mean,
so
it just
okay,
makes no sense.
that raises a question for me. So, and this I think is an important opportunity to really educate people on the difference between conventional medicine, medical approaches, and functional medicine approaches. So, what do you think inside your standard medical training, Amy? How much time did you spend actually looking at female hormone health in
None.
traditional medical school?
I mean,
0.
almost none. Like, I would say I remember learning, like the menstrual cycle. Like I can visualize like the image of, the estrogen goes up and progesterone goes up and like what the uterine lining does. And then I would say I remember in residency looking at a chart of all the different types of oral contraceptives available and like why you would choose one kind over the other because there's all these different kinds.
Got it.
There's ones that change color every week, and then there's, the same ones, and then there's ones that's right when, like, something like Seasonal came out where you could take it continuously for 3 months at a time, and,
Gotcha.
so I remember having a lot of education about what type of birth control pills to use
Drugs.
in
Yeah.
somebody,
Mhm.
um, but never did I ever hear of, like, actually testing somebody's hormones, unless it was, like, something really weird, like, if you had somebody that had some sort of congenital, you know, androgenic syndrome, where you had, like, a teenage girl who had facial hair and, Turner syndrome, some sort of genetic thing or something like that. It's like, "Okay, this is really abnormal," and you
Right.
go chasing their hormones to see if something's going on. So
Interesting.
really, there was never any treatment about testing anybody's hormones to see what was going on.
So interesting. Like
Because the
that.
treatment is easy, right? That, somebody
Right.
comes in and they're having irregular periods or heavy periods or PMS symptoms, so we just put them on birth control. That, like, negates everything and it just controls hormones, so it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is, we use the same treatment.
Yeah.
Then all of
Yeah.
a sudden you're 50 and you go to menopause and then you just switch, to a different type of hormone, but it's the same thing.
Yes. So, I mean, it just a plug for all you functional medicine doctors. It's just like, folks, it's time to make the switch if you're not
Yeah.
working with it. Like, this is you all bring and marry the best of both worlds. And I always tell people, best of intentions. Doctors are trained in their tool sets, and their tool set is a drug and a scalpel. And, for your condition, they just really need to give it a name, to give it a drug, a label, right? But that still doesn't tell you the root cause of what's going on, right?
And
Wow.
it's very, very rare I have patients come in, they go, "Well, what's my diagnosis?" And I go, "I don't have a diagnosis. I have several things that are telling me, these are filling up your bucket and, now your bucket's overflowing and that's what's causing you to have some symptoms." It
Right.
could be a deficiency, it could be an imbalance, it could be a stress on your system, whether it's a toxin or, a stealth infection of some sort, right? So there's all these different things that are going to fill up your bucket, and that's really what we're looking at. And so what I found interestingly is that I was, very focused on hormones because that was kind of my initial introduction into this world. And initially it was like all hormones all the time, and then I started having patients that had some gut stuff. And so I'd be like, "Okay, well, let's test your gut," and, like, we'll find, whatever stealth infections or imbalances might be there, and
Sure.
then I started treating that along with their hormones, and it was, like, exponential that they got better or they
Uh-huh.
stayed better, where somebody would come in and you'd give them, whatever adrenal support and hormone replacement, and they'd do great for a little while, and then, like, they'd come in, 6 months later, 9 months later and be like, "I felt great in the beginning, and now, I'm having these symptoms again, or I'm
Uh-huh.
not sleeping or something," and you'd retest their hormones and they would look pretty normal, and so you're like, "What?" "I don't know what's going on," and now, that I kinda put 2 and 2 together, it's like there's such a connection between the gut and everything, the gut and your immune system, toxins we were talking about, and, your liver has to metabolize those hormones, even though they're bioidentical and they're safe, they still have to go metabolize to come into your system and then go out. And so if your liver is busy metabolizing or trying to protect you from all these toxins and chemicals that you're being exposed to, then it's also not going to metabolize your hormones as well. So I think that's
Absolutely.
probably a huge part of Premarin and PremPro were pills that were taken by mouth. And so those have to, go through your liver, where a lot of our hormone replacement is done with topical hormones. So one, we can use a lower dose because it doesn't have to go through your liver. So it's going right into your system and it's bypassing the liver basically initially. So, we can use lower doses with much less side effects, no side effects really. And I think we've really come full circle where it was like 20 years ago, hormones are bad. And so nobody got them for a long time. And so instead of it being everybody was on Premarin, which was causing a lot of people harm, then all of a sudden we had this phase for really the last 10, 15 years where women were afraid of it. Doctors are afraid of it. Like we're out there teaching these practitioners, like you can use hormones. It's okay. You just have to use the right ones and do it the right way. You don't have to say hormones are bad. And so both the medical world and patients that are out there have been just told that hormones are bad, and so everybody's
Wow.
afraid of it.
Yeah.
And
And there was a black box warning. Did that
there
actually
was
come off
yes,
already?
it just came off, in October,
Okay, gotcha, yeah. And then
for and they're being sort of okay, for it's the black box label came off for the use of vaginal estrogen. Um, so that's really what the specifics are. Um, Simply because again, using a compound hormone that's applied topically is really cheap and inexpensive compared to lots of other drugs that are out there. And so, who's going to pay for the study for that? But we have plenty of studies that show us from long time ago and even up until like 2024, 2025, there's all these new studies that are showing where people are using topical bioidentical hormones, and we're seeing not only the reduction of symptoms, right, and the suffering that women are going through. So it's like, oh, well, you have vaginal dryness. Here's some lube, right?
right,
Or decreased libido is normal. Depression during this time is normal. I'll just give you an antidepressant. Oh, you're not sleeping well. That could be your hormones, but we can't use any hormone replacements. So we'll just give you a sleeping pill. Like we were just replacing all these symptoms with more and more chemicals because we're told, hormones are bad.
right,
Where if we can get the hormones balanced and into a body that can accept them and do what it needs to do with them, then we're knocking out, all these symptoms and all these issues. Number one. And then number two, there's all these studies that talk about the benefit of hormones in terms of prevention of chronic disease. So women who are on hormone replacement have less cognitive decline. They have, less issues with osteoporosis. We know that already. That was never an argument. Cardiovascular disease is directly connected to hormonal imbalances and deficiencies. Even some cancers, right? Everybody's afraid of cancer, but actually not doing hormones can, increase your risk of various cancers. So, I mean, it's just outstanding when you start really looking at that data
mhm.
associated with hormones.
Now, one of the things I hear you talking and other doctors talking about is you do BHRT.
Yes.
Can you kind of explain that term a little bit to the audience about why you guys are making that distinction
Yeah.
and what that's all about?
So what used to be called hormone replacement therapy or HRT was kind of using Premarin or PremPro or some, other type of hormone if it's out there. There were, there's I don't even know the names of them. There used to be S-trace and something else, that you could use or, there's vaginal rings and things like that. I mean, it was all commercialized really. So the distinction is the B stands for bioidentical. And so what that means is going back again to that biochemistry type thing is that the chemical structures of these compounds that we're using are identical to your own estrogen or your own progesterone or your testosterone or whatever. So we measure, and there's various ways to measure. I personally choose to use saliva testing for hormone
Okay.
replacement or
Will
hormone
you do
evaluation and then repeat.
so will you do saliva once you have them on, BHRT, or will you
Both.
do it even in the beginning? Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanna see where you are, right? I
Right.
don't wanna guess because I
Yep.
don't know,
But you would
I
you would
can
use that in combination or over urine?
I prefer it instead of urine,
Okay.
and we'll talk about why in a second. So I do saliva testing. I do an initial evaluation when a patient first comes to me, and then based on what imbalances we might see or deficiencies, then we will replace with bioidentical hormones, meaning that the chemical structure is exactly the same. Again, putting it on topically, whether you put it on your skin or you can use it vaginally instead of taking it orally by mouth so that, we're not going through that first pass metabolism and then repeat testing, usually at, somewhere between 3 to 6 months, depending on the person.
Mhm.
So I wanna see, is what I'm putting in your body doing what it's supposed to do? Do we
Mhm.
need to readjust or reevaluate, tweak the balance a little bit, that sort of thing? Also in combination with symptoms. So let's say, we tried a little bit of testosterone and, or we tried some estrogen, progesterone, we're still having some night sweats or something. Okay, well, we need to, tweak that balance some. So saliva testing, because I'm using topical hormones for the most part,
Yeah.
it's going to be much more accurate. So
Yep.
so saliva basically, if you do a blood test, this is in your veins, it gets really kind of complicated, but it's venous blood that we're collecting, and so that's kind of the leftovers. It's like after the hormone has gone where it needs to go in your body, then what's left over goes into your veins, goes through your liver, and then out into your urine. And so we're kinda
Let's
getting leftovers.
Yeah, let's pause there for a second because this is where a lot of people don't really realize, a lot of patients, is that your medical doctor, if they are testing hormones, is typically just doing blood serum testing, which in the world of functional medicine is understood to be the least accurate in terms of really understanding your hormone picture.
It can be a picture in the beginning, right? So if you're coming in and you're a virgin to hormones is kind of what I joke around, but like you have no hormones, let's say you're 55 years old and you're through menopause and you've never had any hormone replacement. You can do blood testing there to see, okay,
Which,
your levels are low.
yeah,
But if you start replacing with topical, it's not gonna show up in the blood. So it's really hard to compare. So you have no comparison to where you were before versus where you are now, if you're doing saliva testing afterwards.
right.
So to
And
me,
then
why
are
not
you
just
doing
start
pellet
with the
therapy as
baseline?
well? Besides just,
I personally do not do pellet therapy. So part of the second part of the B for bioidentical is one, the chemical structure needs to be bioidentical. And in my opinion, I think it also needs to be physiologically identical. And so what I don't like about pellets, I understand they chemically are bioidentical, but physiologically, the theory is that you can get these pellets of hormones injected in under the skin into the kind of the fat, and they're often done like in the hip area. We got plenty of little extra right there. Most women do anyway. And so these pellets are injected, and people think that they're going to be delivered a little bit over time so they can get pellets implanted every 3 to 4 months. And so it's more convenient and, that kind of thing. But what I've experienced in testing, so I'll have patients that got a pellet and, accidentally came to me as a new patient. And so, they just got their pellets 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. Their estrogen, particularly, and testosterone is what they put in pellets, is through the roof.
yes.
So and physiologically speaking, like, we weren't designed to have these hormones that go way up and then kinda trickle back down to nothing, back to the liver, where and then we're kind of oversaturating. So what I see a lot in people that get pellets is they're like, "Man, when I first started pellets, I felt amazing."
Yeah,
They get this flood of all the hormones, particularly
right.
testosterone. I got all this energy, I feel great. And then,
Yeah.
like, by the time they get to 6 months, 9 months, a year later, they're like, "My pellets don't work as much as they did
Mhm.
before." The dose is the same, and so they end up increasing the dose. And
Mhm.
what's happening, and there's all these analogies you can use, but imagine that, we've had a drought and the ground, the grass is super dry. And, we start to like flood it. Then we have a flood and it's like you can't put any more water in this grass. Like it's not
Right,
not going to be helpful if you
right,
flood it over and over
right.
again versus a little trickle. You could flood it a little bit in the beginning. That's not going to hurt anything, but like a little trickle every day is going to make things work much better than this flood and then this drought, right? Like you're just not going to your body's the same way, right? It doesn't want to be on this roller coaster ride. And so you can cycle them a little bit in somebody who's still cycling. So if you're perimenopausal in your, 40s, we'll use a lot of just progesterone and maybe some testosterone or something like that. But, once we get into actual postmenopause when we're not cycling anymore, then, that's when estrogen replacement comes in. Um, so that's what I do, why we use bioidentical and again, bioidentical meaning the structure, but also physiologic. So I don't feel comfortable. I don't think that there's enough progesterone in the world to match the amount of estrogen that we get in those pellets in the beginning. Um, Progesterone is great. It's a calming hormone. It makes you feel good. People that felt great when they're pregnant, like not in the beginning when you're nauseous and tired and not when you feel like a whale at the end, but that middle zone of pregnancy, women are glowing, their hair looks great, they feel good. Like that's progesterone and that's really good. And so progesterone goes down much earlier than progesterone or than estrogen does. So we'll start to have progesterone deficiency even in our mid 30s,
Mhm.
depending on your cortisol and stress on your system, right? It comes down faster. And so progesterone's great, but it also, if you get into higher dose of progesterone, it make you sleepy because it's calming your brain down so much. Now it's like, I'm too tired. And so you
Right.
can't really find a good balance there to protect the uterus and the breast tissue from overexposure to estrogen. So pellets just get really complicated and confusing. And
Got
so
it.
I've chosen in my practice not to do that. Um,
And you mentioned why you were gonna make the distinction too, I think, about the saliva versus urine too.
yes.
Tell me more about that.
So the urine test can be helpful in looking at how your hormones are being metabolized.
Mhm.
So again, they have to go like into your system, they go where they need to go, they get sent to your liver, and then your liver kind of packages them up and then sends them out through your kidneys. And so when you get a urine test, you're again seeing kind of the leftovers of what's happening. And so it's really hard again to measure what's coming out and is that appropriate for what levels your tissues need and your brains and your bones and your skin and all that sort of stuff needs. So it's less accurate when you're trying to determine dosing. And so the best reason for using urine for hormones is looking at safety. And so if we are worried about, are these hormones potential for causing harm, whether that's increased inflammation or whether that's, breast health or something like that, then you can use urine to see, hey, am I this gets really complicated, but like estrogen can go three different ways. And if it goes the right way, then it's healthy. And if it goes the wrong way, and that could be based on your liver and your pathways and all that kind of stuff and what other stressors are going on in your body. And so if your estrogen goes the wrong way, then that can be more likely to turn into a cancer uh, risk, for lack
Got
of
it.
a better word. It's not
Yeah.
gonna We don't know if it's gonna cause cancer or not, but we know that puts you at more risk. And so if we have somebody and some doctors will do a urine test on a yearly basis just to check in and make sure everything's fine for all their patients. Others will do it, as needed based on the patient's concerns for breast cancer or, risk associated because they had a personal history of breast cancer or a family member with breast cancer and they're real nervous about, hormone replacement from that perspective. So that can give us an idea of how these hormones are being metabolized and if they're going down the wrong pathway. And then that doesn't mean we have to stop hormone replacement. We just have to support those pathways, which is exactly what you do, right? So we need to make sure, are they methylating? We can get really fancy words. Are they oxidating, right? And there's supplements and support that you can use to help make sure hormones are going down the right path.
Now, when you're talking about urine testing, Dr. W, you'll really just do that one, sample, that one specimen, correct? Yeah, and I wanna make a distinction too for some of my listeners that and patients in particular that we do urine testing, but we'll do it throughout the day. We'll do several samples.
Yeah, we still collect 4 I'm sorry, I thought you meant, like, one time in a time frame.
Yeah,
So, no,
got
we
it.
collect 4 samples throughout the
Okay,
day,
good, good.
for sure. So
Alright.
you're getting, especially if
Yeah,
somebody is using hormone replacement, you're gonna see different levels depending on the timing of when they apply their cream or when they take their
yeah.
hormone replacements.
Absolutely. Awesome. So I have, thank you so much for sending so much of this, sharing your wealth of knowledge. This is incredible information. So I think the bottom line is there's really some distinction that I heard in this conversation, which is, there's this test and there's this established narrative, which isn't that uncommon in terms of the world of health. So this isn't the only context in which that happens, right? But there's been this longstanding belief around hormone therapy. We have also recognized there were some shortcomings with those studies. We also have looked at now, a good distinction is you were talking about progesterone when old HRT was progesterone, a very
Yeah.
different form of it. So we've also changed some of the products that we're actually using in today's context, And there's the advent of the functional medicine doctor who's really trained exceptionally well and able to prescribe and work with you in your body in this context. And we love that because I've also seen where, I've been in practice for 20 years, 40,000 visits. And I got to tell you that, we work at the level of repairing the kidney, repairing the endocrine organs. And so that allows women to have the opportunity to have balanced hormones without the use of even BHRT. However, that takes some time. And sometimes when patients come in the door and sometimes when you're, first entering or stepping foot into your health and healing journey, these tools can be very helpful. And I've seen that clinically that they have there's justification for helping to manage and calm down some of the crazy
Yeah, I
inflammation
mean, if you're
happening.
not sleeping and you're super
Yeah,
anxious and
can't
you're,
heal. Absolutely.
metabolically, you wanna eat all the time, that kind of thing, and you're just super frustrated, like, you can't do the things that we're recommending in terms of, what we think is common knowledge of just lifestyle, right? Like, we wanna eat healthier and we wanna exercise and we wanna get good sleep, and, it can be almost for many women feeling like it's their fault, that they don't feel good because they can't do those things that they're supposed to do. And so sometimes we have to, like, put a Band-Aid, if you wanna call it, but a healthy Band-Aid, not the traditional kind. Let's
Yeah,
get feeling better first, and
right.
then, we'll start working on, we were talking about that earlier, like, let's get somebody feeling better so that they can then do, they have the capacity and the resilience to be able to do some of these things that we're asking them to do, and then
Absolutely.
go even deeper into, some of the work that you do, so.
Absolutely. And Dr. Amy, wrapping up today, what's a better question that you think women can ask themselves, or maybe men too? They're getting to this point in midlife when they might need to start looking at is hormone BHRT, hormone replacement therapy, bioidentical? Is this the answer for me? Or what in general would you say is a better question for them to ask about approaching midlife and their health? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, that's we were talking about that earlier. So I have a couple different answers for that, and it's hard, when somebody's sitting in a traditional medical office. One, they're kind of rushed, right, and they're hurried, and so it's really hard to question, that professional, right? I don't want to question that person. Are they talking, are they doing the right thing? But that's a huge part of why I do what I do in getting on podcasts and trying to help people to understand. I would love for you to come see me as a patient if you're in my area, right? But I'm only licensed in so many places. And really what I want is for people to hear the language that we're talking about. So when we talk about bioidentical and HRT and, liver and all that kind of stuff, like, can you use that language to be able to go out and search for a practitioner who speaks the same language, right, in your area so that, I'm only one person, I can see a patient one on one, or we can talk to the thousands of people who might listen to this podcast. And then, we're exponentially helping more women. So I think, the answer to that question is like, if somebody's telling you something is bad for you or that we can't do that, or it's unsafe or dangerous and you just have to suffer, just like I said, it puts you between a rock and a hard place of, going against your regular doctor or being a bad patient by not taking, a medication that they're recommending or something like that. And so, really ultimately, if you're finding that stress or that struggle of like, this doesn't quite make sense to me, like this doesn't seem like this should be the right answer,
Yeah.
then that's really what, would trigger you if you have that internal feeling that goes, "This just doesn't jive," right? Like, why would my own practitioner want me to suffer through a side effect or suffer through a symptom because there's no treatment for it? There's all your body is magical. It's supposed to work the way it's supposed to
Yes.
work, and that's right
Yeah.
down your alley, right? Is like, if we could just give it the opportunity to work the way it's supposed to work, then we're
Mhm.
all supposed to feel great.
Absolutely.
So having symptoms and suffering is not what we're supposed to be doing. And so, that's I don't know if that's a direct question or not, but just, if you get that feeling on the inside, I think it should just be, this doesn't seem normal, right? This
Yeah.
doesn't seem right. And there must be more to this. And so, we are in a magical world of information overload to some degree, but the information's out there. And, we as business owners have to start living in the world of AI, right? So, many of us are having to tweak our websites a little bit to be searchable on chat and, whatever other search engines that people are using that are AI driven now. And so it used to be Google and, things like that. And so, not that we're having to, falsify our information. It's just different the way how AI is looking for that information. And so AI is okay. It's out there and it's going to give you help. I wouldn't say that you should ask AI to tell you exactly what your hormone replacement therapy
Right.
prescription should be, but I
Well, we
think
have a
the
lot of people trying to
information
do that.
that's there,
Yeah, they're trying to replace their doctor.
yeah, that's
Okay.
not helpful. But I think it's, searching and using this language, like I said, and getting out there and being your own advocate and saying, does this make sense? Or is there an alternative way?
Yes.
And oftentimes there's going to be an alternative way.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much,
Yeah.
Dr. Aimee, for joining us today, sharing a wealth of information, experience, knowledge. We appreciate it. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I enjoyed chatting.
Thanks for tuning into the Resiliency Method, the Truth About Healing podcast. If this episode spoke to you, follow, share, and leave us a review. Are you ready to go deeper? Book your discovery call now at drerikaonline.com/discovery and take your first step today.